when I first came, I'd done work in UK, I'd done work in Ireland, I'd done work in Malaysia, and I came here to Kenya, and my brief was to transfer technology, to teach people, how to manage brands, to teach them how Unilever advertised. And we had a very good book. We had a book which was called UPGAR, the Unilever Plan for Great Advertising. And when I read that book today, I can see that there are some things that definitely haven't changed about marketing. But I was a really passionate marketeer. And one of the things that I did in Unilever was to launch Royco. And if you actually read the book, you'll read how Royco nearly didn't get launched. So there's a story in there about my days working for East Africa Industries and the things that we did. We were actually, I think, the first company to use low unit price packs. We packed timber, which had previously been in tins, and we packed it in small wrappers of 250 gram and 100 grams, so that we were attacking the bottom of the pyramid, but we were also attacking the dollops of fat which were dished into newspapers, pretty unhygienic. So there's a few stories there about East Africa Industries in this book. But the fun really started after I left Unilever in 1982 and started a new business here, which in fact was almost unique worldwide. Whilst I had been at Unilever, I had actually heard some of our advertisements going out badly. They were distorted, or they were cut at the beginning or cut at the end. And we didn't know the extent, of what these bad ads were. But whereas with the newspapers, there was Nation and Standard here in those days, and then there were magazines, for all those, we could point at a bad ad and we get a make good. But we never ever seemed to get a make good from Voice of Kenya. There was limited media in those days. Voice of Kenya really had a Swahili service, and they had an English service that they called the General Service. So there wasn't much, media until we had KTN coming on as a second television station. But anyway, this idea was to actually record everything that went out over air, so that we were recording everything which went out from start-up in the mornings until late at night. And the purpose of it was to verify, what ads went out and what quality they had. Now, what was very surprising to me is that when we ran these tests, we found such a large number of ads that were going out wrongly. In fact, the error rate was something close to 30%. And this was horrifying. And a lot of my friends were saying, you'll never get away with this, Roger. You're spying on government services. And remember, these were the days of the Moi regime, when things were not free and easy like all you people can enjoy now. Things were fairly tough. But anyway, I still went, of course, ahead with it. And my first task was to convince Voice of Kenya that, like every other media, they should give make goods if the ads went out poorly. And I was thinking very hard about how I would do this. It seemed quite a formidable task. But I invited the commercial manager along with his team, and I said, look, this is what we're finding. And I gave him a presentation of all these advertisements along. And much to my surprise, he had a big grin on his face. And he said, you mean to say that you're recording all this and you can prove what goes out? I said, yes, we have it all on tape. We can play it back to you any time of day. And so he turned to his colleagues and said, this is what we can talk to our production people about. Now there is somebody who is actually monitoring the media, and we'll have to up our game. And that's what happened. But there was a log jam of applications for Make Good. At the same time that we were actually running the verification service, we were also starting to collect data on expenditure. Because previously, when I was there in East Africa Industries, we couldn't see what our competitors were spending. We knew what we were spending, but any figures that were available didn't even agree proportionately with what we knew we were spending on our brands. So there was clearly another opportunity to provide data. And I think we revolutionized really the advertising industry by actually being able to produce data from which the media departments could check that they were getting the ads that they had booked, and also that they could have data on which to plan the media. So it was very successful, and you would think with a 35% error rate that everybody would want to join up. And there were companies that were wanting to join up very quickly, but there were others that didn't. And the reasons for that, well, you'll read about it in the book. We actually found that really wherever we went, because we reproduced this in other countries, and that really people in those stations would really rather do a good job than a bad job. And I think, even though we found awful messes in some places, in Tanzania, for example, there seemed to be so many different rate cards for the same media that it was difficult to actually, know what the real rate card was. But, we organised it so that we had that. I think the next thing that, and I should say that there are a couple of things which I think you'll see in the book there that really helped get this operation off the ground. When I left Unilever, I was a very passionate marketeer. I'd set up the first initial training course, for the MSK, and I became chairman whilst I was still with EAI for a year, and then I thought I was going away. But I didn't. I stayed, and so subsequent to that, I then became chairman of the MSK for about another 11 years, longer than I really wanted to, but I just seemed the most appropriate person to be in there at that time. The next thing really which happened of great note, because you have your challenges all the way along the line, is that we actually started doing audience research. But before I get to that, I just wanted to say that this book is got me on the cover, riding a wave of the brands, or some of the brands that I've been associated with. But this book is not all about me. There are so many stories about other people in this book which are really fascinating and interesting. And lots of those other people, who were with us, and who were also not with us. They may have been competitors, although they may have been people in the media. There are all these stories. So really, part of the value of this book and the research which Lloyd Igani did, is to create a history of, first of all, the advertising industry, and then a history of the market research industry, because we were in at the beginning of that. In those very early days, there were only a few companies that actually did market research. BAT, brewers a little bit, but not so much in those days, and Colgate and a few other companies. But mostly the only company that was there was the Research International, which had been called RBL, and that it would only really do research for East Africa industries. So there was an opportunity to do research for these other companies, and we started doing a little bit of that. But the big breakthrough for research when we entered it, and this is all about the same time that the East African community was opening up again, and we took monitoring into, first of all, Uganda and then Tanzania. But at the same time, there became a need to do a lot of market research. And so that was our opportunity to get into market research in a bigger way. And then we had a big breakthrough. Peter Turvey, who was the MD of Procter & Gamble here, came to me and he said, "You have got the footprint that we need. We would like you to do our market research for us." Now, Procter & Gamble had a formidable reputation for being very demanding. And I said to him, we are pretty clever at doing our media monitoring, but we're not quite so good at market research. And he said, "Don't worry, we'll teach you." And Procter & Gamble taught us. And that was a really big benefit to us because, we then were able to upskill our people and become very competent, in the research field. So I think that is, the way that things progressed. We developed into other countries in Africa. Apart from East Africa, we went into Mozambique. We went into Zambia, we went into Ghana, and we gained a foothold in Nigeria. One of the things that I actually started with, and this is appropriate to, I think, some of the things that have been talked about today about giving back, is that I started my small team of just 6 people back in 1983, which quickly became 20 or so, and half of those people were suffering from physical disabilities, so they were physically challenged. And I didn't want them all to be that way, so we had able-bodied as well as disabled ones, so that nobody could really accuse us that we were not, treating disabilities fairly. But that team of physically challenged people, many of them went on to get very good jobs, elsewhere. Some of them stayed, and there's a lady called Catherine Kihara, who was with us last Thursday, and she has stayed and occupies a very senior position now in Ipsos. And she went to these various countries and trained people to do the media monitoring job. And wherever she went, she recruited people, as she says, from the same tribe, those who were physically disabled. So across Africa, I think we had a workforce, which had a good proportion of people, who were physically challenged. Well, I think a lot of the rest is history, which you need to read about in the book. But we became, before we sold, we became a real multinational company with the capability of carrying out projects, all over the continent. And this is certainly not something that I did alone. I think there's an African proverb that if you want to go somewhere quickly, you go alone. But if you want to go far, then you go with other people. And that's the story in this book, because it was the other people that I was working with, very many talented, Kenyans, who really sort of built the business I just happened to be the person, that was in the centre of it all. So I believe very strongly, that anybody who is now working in the business, and one thing I wanted to give that business was longevity. So I'm very, very glad that actually I recruited you, Clay, if you remember. And having Chris Gathega, here, who is continuing the business, making things continue to grow and develop and do all sorts of exciting things, is really wonderful. But I think anybody that works in the business really has to be grateful to those people who were part of that small team that I began with. And in fact, this book is dedicated. There's a dedication page there, to that small team, of half of them physically challenged, who actually, with rudimentary equipment, I mean, we got more sophisticated as we went through. They're the people that everybody who's working in that business now should be grateful for. I guess, how did we do it is something that you'll read about in the book. But, we were using, all the best, techniques that I knew. I suppose inherently I knew marketing. It was in my blood from what I had learned in Unilever. But when I started the business, there was nobody, there was no book that you could get on how to market a service company. Now, of course, you can find it everywhere. But so it was really finding our path, finding our way. We had our visions. We wanted to become a billion-shilling company in a target year. I forget which year it was now, but I know that we exceeded it 2 years earlier than we had. So I think we were making more of the right moves and the wrong moves, but certainly we made wrong moves, and you'll read about those wrong moves in the book, because one of the things that I asked Lloyd to do is, I don't want a sanitized version of, what I did or what other people did. Let's have it with all the blemishes that there are there, because it's from your mistakes that you learn. So I think, anyway, he wouldn't have wanted to write all good things. It's just not in his nature. So I think he did a very, very good job on that. He's very talented. I chose him because I liked the pithy way he wrote. I liked the fact that he had been a copywriter, and so he wasn't wasting words. And I liked his humour. You'll find a lot of fun in this book, because that's what life is about. We have a lot of fun. We celebrate things when we do things well. And I remember Emily, who's here today. When we won a contract, she used to ring a bell, and that made everybody excited and fired up, to go out and get more business. So these are things that I certainly am very grateful for. The people that are in the company and that I worked with, they're my friends, and they're friends that I'm very grateful